Abandoned Maid reveals incredible 25-year transformation in court, shocking millionaire to tears. Emily stood at the brink of her new beginning. The courthouse loomed ahead, its brick facade a silent witness to stories of struggle and triumph. Today, she would reclaim her lost dignity, her voice rising above the whispers of the past. Once just a maid in the opulent mansion of Mark, a remorseless businessman, she now wore her truth like armor. She was no longer the woman who scrubbed floors and served meals in silence. No, today, Emily was a mother, a warrior on the front line of justice. Years ago, as a single mother barely making ends meet, she felt the sting of scorn, the judgment from those who looked down upon her with disdain. Memories of that life flooded back, nights spent juggling 2 jobs and her kids' homework, the constant weight of poverty pressing down on her shoulders. But through it all, she'd find strength in her children's laughter, the small moments that fueled her desire for a better future. They would gather around their dining table, each one sharing dreams that sparkled like stars against the backdrop of their modest life. Emily's heart raced as she prepared to enter the courtroom. Her pulse quickened at the thought of facing Mark, an embodiment of everything that had tried to break her. The fear that had once gripped her now transformed into a simmering determination. It was no longer about survival. This was about justice and telling her story. As she stepped onto the witness stand, she looked out at the crowd, feeling their eyes bore into her soul. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. 25 years, she began, her voice quaking with emotion. 25 years since I first walked into that mansion. I was a young mother seeking a way out of poverty. I thought I'd found it, but in truth, I had merely walked into a gilded cage. The room shifted. She could see the twitching eyebrows and surprised faces of those who never imagined such depths of despair lay concealed behind Mark's sleek reputation. As she recounted her trials, she paused at the moment when she had chosen to stand up for herself, no longer just a caretaker, but a fighter for justice. Her eyes darted to the back of the room, where Mark sat, his confident smirk replaced by the tightening of his jaw. He heard her words, each one piercing through his carefully curated facade. Then, the unexpected happened. Emily mentioned a name intertwined with both their lives, a name that struck a chord deep within him. For a moment, the courtroom held its breath, and in that heartbeat of realization, cracks began to form in Mark's steely exterior. A look of confusion flitted across his face, chased by the dawning horror of what Emily had brought to light. As gasps filled the air, Emily stood tall, knowing this wasn't just her moment, it was one for all who had been silenced. What could become of their intertwined destinies? Would the truth be enough to bridge the chasm that separated their worlds? The silence was deafening. The future hung in the balance as both their lives teetered on the edge of change. The tension in the courtroom crackled like electricity. Emily felt it wash over her, a palpable rush that sent adrenaline coursing through her veins. She had unleashed a truth, and now it lay raw and vulnerable in the air. All eyes were on her, and for the first time, she felt the immense power of her voice. She could see the murmurs ripple through the crowd, whispers of disbelief and sympathy. And her closest friend sat in the front row, her hands clasped together, eyes glistening with pride and support. Mark's response was the one everyone awaited. His once unyielding composure crumbled before their eyes. She watched as he clenched his fists, the familiar shadows that had haunted her for years chasing across his face. Suddenly, he was no longer the imposing figure of authority. He was just a man flawed, terrified, and exposed. Emily. His voice broke the silence, shaky but forcing its way into the tension. You don't understand what you're doing. Her heart pounded. She had expected defiance, maybe even anger, but this was a plea. No, Mark. I do understand, she replied, her voice steadying. She felt the weight of a quarter-century of suffering, generations of struggle gathered behind her. I understand the power of truth. With each word, Emily felt the barriers she had built around her heart chip away, revealing strength she didn't know existed within her. She was no longer that timid girl who accepted her fate. Today, she was a mother, a survivor, and a beacon for others who suffered in silence. Your fortune came at a cost, Mark, she continued. It cost lives, including my own. You may have built an empire, but you don't own our stories. The breaths in the room were shallow, expectant. She could see the jurors leaning in, captivated, and her family, her children waiting outside, unaware of the monumental change unfolding that day. Emily dared not break her gaze from Mark, who was visibly rattled. The weight of her truth began to settle over him like a heavy blanket, suffocating his bravado. And then, just as the air felt heavy with fate, someone spoke up unexpectedly, a voice from the audience she didn't recognize. You're not alone, Emily. The exclamation pierced like a shot, and startled gasps echoed. It was a statement of solidarity that rippled through the crowd. One by one, others began to lend their voices to the space, sharing snippets of their own stories of struggle against the tides of power and wealth. In that moment, it wasn't just Emily's battle anymore. It was a collective fight for justice. The courtroom transformed into an arena of resilience, a place of strength and unity. Emily's heart swelled. This was the change she had hoped for, the uprising against neglect and injustice taking shape before her eyes. But despite the surge of empowerment, doubts loomed. What if she was still not enough? What if Mark's final play turned the tides back in his favor? Suddenly, Emily noticed a flicker of something new in Mark's eyes, a hint of desperation mixed with fear. Would he lash out, or had she finally pierced the armor around his heart? She took a deep breath, uncertain yet determined, knowing that the climax of this struggle was still ahead. The ultimate question loomed, waiting for resolution. Would he accept responsibility, or would he fight to maintain his empire built on deception? And in that moment, the fate of them all hung suspended in the air, filling Emily with both fear and hope. The courtroom was hushed, almost reverent. Emily watched as Mark's expression shifted, the hardened facade slipping down like an old coat that no longer fit. Confusion danced behind his eyes, mixed with a fear that felt unfamiliar yet oddly fulfilling. This wasn't just a fight for Emily anymore. It was a battle for truth, for every person who had suffered in silence at the hands of ambition and greed. Is this how you want your legacy to be remembered? She felt the power in her own words, the way they echoed off the walls and sank into the hearts of those present. Built on truths twisted and lives shattered? You've constructed a fortress of lies, Mark, and it's time to let it crumble. The murmurs in the audience intensified, turning from whispers of disbelief into full-throated affirmations. Yes. Speak it! A man shouted from the back, and Emily felt a wave of warm support crash over her, invigorating her spirit. Emily, Mark began, his voice cracking under the weight of her accusations. You don't have all the facts. You don't know I know enough, she countered, finding strength in her own resolve. Your empire is built on backs broken by your ambition, families destroyed by your greed. And today, you stand as a man who has the chance to change that, but you are choosing fear instead. She paused, taking a breath to steady herself. The air weighed heavily with anticipation. Mark looked small, much smaller than the man towering over her in her memories. For years he had loomed large in her life, a reminder of her struggles, a symbol of everything she had fought against. But now, in this moment, she felt a surge of power run through her, as if the collective voices of so many were encompassing her, wrapping her in hope. Just imagine, she continued, her words flowing more easily now, if you faced the truth. Perhaps it could set you free too. It could be your chance for redemption. At that moment, Mark faltered. His defenses crumbling, he seemed to shrink back into himself, letting the words wash over him. She could see the conflict warring within him, a flicker of the man she once knew battling against the shadow of the tyrant he had become. Emily, please, he struggled, but she pressed on, not willing to back down now. Have you ever looked into the eyes of those you've hurt and saw their pain? Her voice was softer now, almost a whisper, yet it held a power that captivated every person in the room. Do you feel the weight of their suffering? Or are you so lost in the wealth you've accumulated that it numbs you to their stories? The room was silent now, all eyes trained on Mark. It felt as if time stood still. Would he respond? Would he break? Just as Emily thought she could make him see, someone else spoke up again from the crowd, their tone unwavering. You can't hide behind that wealth anymore, Mark. It's time to face the music. Each voice added to the swell of unity that pushed against Mark's armor. With every tentative heartbeat, Emily felt herself caught on a precipice of change. Her hope soared, but the shadow of doubt lingered. Would he really embrace this opportunity for change, or was he still just a man afraid of losing everything? As Mark's gaze dropped to the floor, a mixture of shame and anger seemed to battle within him, layering the tension with uncertainty. Would he finally accept the consequences of his actions? Or would he claw back at the remnants of his power? The tension held like a taut string, ready to snap at any moment. Emily breathlessly awaited his response, knowing that it would either shatter the chains that bound her or tighten them around her once more. What would he choose? The future was veiled in uncertainty, and both dread and anticipation filled her. Suddenly, she saw him take a deep breath, his eyes rising to meet hers once more. "Let us talk about the truth then," Mark said slowly, a tremor in his voice that hinted at a fragile resolution. And just like that, they were on the verge of an unimaginable revelation, but Emily couldn't shake the feeling that anything could happen next. Mark's voice trembled in the charged silence of the courtroom like the reverberation of a distant thunderstorm. "I never wanted it to end up like this," he admitted, not meeting her gaze. "It started with ambition, and somewhere along the line, it twisted into something I could no longer control." Emily's heart beat erratically in her chest. This was the moment she had fought for, the moment of truth. She felt the ground beneath her shift, as if the very foundation of their intertwined lives was crumbling and rebuilding in real time. "Tell them everything," she urged softly. "This isn't just about you. It's about the lives that hang in the balance." Mark clenched his fists, his knuckles white against the wood of the table. She could see the battle raging within him, the struggle between the man he had become and the ghost of the man he once was. "How do you even begin to untangle 25 years of decisions?" he murmured, grappling for the right words, his voice cracking under the weight of fear and shame. "Start at the beginning," Emily encouraged, her heart aching for the way he was unraveling. "I wanted to build something to matter. But the further I pushed, the more lost I became. I shut out the voices of everyone who mattered, dismissed the lives I impacted," he confessed, the tremor in his voice echoing her own past pain. "People were just numbers to me. I thought I was creating something grand, but I built it on their suffering." The audience was rapt, hanging on to every word that fell from Mark's lips, each admission peeling back layers of years-long deception. Emily felt the shift. From anger to acceptance, from judgment to understanding. Could this really be the turning point they both desperately needed? "Did you ever think about what you were doing?" a voice called out, cutting through the tension, demanding answers from Mark. The speaker was a woman, her eyes filled with fire. "Did you ever stop to think how your greed impacted real lives?" Mark looked up sharply, meeting her fierce gaze. "I can't undo what I've done," he said, anguish flooding his voice. "But I am prepared to atone. I need to start making things right." His voice faltered. Emily felt the heat of his words flow over her, igniting a flicker of hope deep within her breast. "We need to believe in the possibility of change," she said, her voice steady now, carrying the weight of determination. "What are you willing to do?" someone shouted from the back. Mark seemed to gather himself. "I'm ready to fund reparations for those affected, to create a foundation that prioritizes those whom I wronged. I want to listen, to actually listen." Gasps spread through the courtroom, but Emily felt something shift within the audience. Doubt was being replaced with curiosity, a spark igniting where darkness once resided. "Talk is cheap," the woman chimed in again, her voice firm. "We need action. We've had years of promises." Her words hung in the air, unyielding. Emily's heart raced. This was no longer just about Mark's admission. This was about what it meant for everyone involved, including herself. Mark's shoulders slumped, weighed down with the burden of his own making, yet Emily could see a different light igniting in his eye. One of resolve, not just for himself but for those who had suffered under the weight of his empire. I need help. I can't do this alone. If I'm honest, I need Emily's help. The room was electrified. Emily could feel the energy shift as all eyes turned to her. Would she stand beside the man who had haunted her dreams and shaped her fight? Will you help him? A voice echoed out, piercing through Emily's thoughts. Can she trust him? Suddenly, the room felt suffocating, her heartbeat pounding in her ears like a drum. Would she seize this moment for transformation, or would fear pull her back into the shadows? The stakes had never been higher, and the outcome was completely uncertain. Would she stand tall against the tide of doubt, or would she let this opportunity slip away? As moments stretched like rubber bands ready to snap, Emily took a deep breath. Let us find a way, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, but echoing in the collective hearts of those present. What had she just committed to, and where would that leap of faith lead them both? Emily's words hung in the air, thick with uncertainty and possibility. As she stood there, it felt as if the entire courtroom inhaled in unison. She could hardly process the gravity of her commitment. Had she truly agreed to help Mark? She could feel eyes burning into her, assessing her loyalty and courage, or perhaps their skepticism was just a mirror reflecting her own doubts. Mark looked at her, desperation etched on his face. Thank you, he whispered, and for a split second, the weight of his shame seemed to lift. But Emily could see the tremors beneath his skin, the fear of failure looming larger than life itself. Let us first be clear, she said slowly, gathering the strength to confront not only Mark but also herself. This isn't about absolution for you, Mark. It's about the people you've hurt. The crowd shifted, mumbles of agreement rippling through them. Yes. Just talk to us. What about their stories? A man shouted from the back, his voice tinged with both anger and anticipation. What can you even offer them? A woman added, crossing her arms. Emily felt the tension rise, but she stood steadfast. Mark's eyes darted to her, seeking answers, seeking strength. I have to earn their trust back, Mark stated, breathing heavily as if the very words were a struggle. I need to understand what I put them through. I want to hear their pain, no more spreadsheets or cold numbers. I want to connect. Emily placed a hand on his arm, squeezing it gently. Then let us do it together, she said, and for a moment, it felt like they were a united front against uncertainty. But inside, doubt was an insidious snake, coiling around her heart. What if you backtrack? Someone shouted skeptically. What if you revert to your old self? Mark met that challenge head-on, the resolve solidifying in his voice. I can't promise I won't falter sometimes, he admitted, but I can promise that I will face those mistakes and work to rectify them however hard it might be. The murmurs swelled again like waves crashing, people weighing his sincerity. Mark's words seemed to carve a new path for him, but could they do the same for Emily? As the crowd deliberated, a soft voice pierced through the chaos. I want to share my story if you're willing to listen. It came from a woman, her hands trembling as she stepped forward. Emily felt a spark of recognition in her chest. The woman had been one of the many affected by Mark's actions. Please, Emily urged her gently. We're here to listen. The woman took a deep breath, eyes locked on Mark. My husband lost his job because your company undercut him. We lost our home after that and a piece of our family unity. Tears glistened in her eyes, but her voice held strength. You need to hear these stories, Mark. You need to be reminded that these aren't just numbers. They're lives. Mark nodded, visibly shaken yet glued to her words. I'm so sorry, he managed, his voice cracking under the strain of his emotion. Emily felt the atmosphere shift, raw and potent. The woman's revelation ignited a ripple, encouraging others to step forward with their experiences. One by one, voices rose, layers of shared pain unveiling under the spotlight of accountability. Through this catharsis, Emily began to feel the power of their stories, a possibility of healing she hadn't thought possible. This wasn't just about Mark's redemption anymore. It was about building bridges, reclaiming lives, and finding collective closure. Amidst the emotional torrent, Mark turned to Emily, his gaze steady now. "Will you be with me, guiding me through these stories?" Emily felt the weight of that question. She had stepped into the unknown, bound to a man she could barely forgive. But perhaps, somewhere in this chaotic journey, they could find something beautiful together. "Together," she replied, echoing her earlier promise but feeling a new resilience behind it. But would that resilience be enough to hold them together as the stories unfolded, and the past clawed its way back into the light? The courtroom buzzed with anticipation, each story an opportunity for connection, and Emily knew deep within that the journey was just beginning. Would every step forward withstand the shadows of doubt that still loomed? The atmosphere in the courtroom thickened as more voices began to rise, each one a thread weaving a tapestry of pain and resilience. Emily watched, heart pounding, as different faces emerged, each carrying their own burdens. They were stepping into the light, risking vulnerability, and Mark stood silent, a mix of fear and responsibility radiating from him. One man, his voice gravelly with emotion, stepped forward. "I lost my daughter's college fund because of the way your company mishandled our community's resources." His hands trembled slightly, but the truth bore weight in his words. "She is forced to choose between working and her dreams. You took that hope away from us." Mark paled, tightening his grip on the edge of the table. Emily felt her breath catch as she witnessed the shame wash over him, painting his face with sorrow. The realization of impact crushed him like a heavy stone, and she wanted desperately to reach out, to comfort both the man before them and Mark at the same time, two men caught in the crossfire of choices that led them to this moment. "I didn't know," Mark said, his voice hoarse. "I had no idea, and that's exactly the problem," shouted an older woman with fiery eyes. "You thought we were just another statistic, didn't you? Just numbers on a spreadsheet, and you kept climbing higher. Well, we fell. We still fall." Mark's face reflected anguish, his eyes wide as he absorbed the weight of each story, each accusation cutting deeper than any document he'd ever read. He seemed to shrink, a man consumed by the enormity of their collective hurt. Emily turned to the crowd, her own heart heavy with compassion. "Everyone here deserves to be heard," she said softly but firmly. "These stories are powerful, they are life. It's time for us to demand that those in power listen, to create change that resonates far beyond this moment." The older woman nodded, tears glistening in her eyes, softened by Emily's words. Another voice rose, impassioned. "You want to connect, Mark? Well, connection isn't just listening, it's taking action." The speaker was a young man, his eyes aflame with purpose. "What will you do? Will this be just another moment where we pour out our souls only to be let down again?" Mark's throat constricted. "No," he replied, the word barely a whisper. "I can't let this be in vain. I want tea." A ripple ran through the crowd. Could this really be the moment that ignited genuine change? Emily sensed the tide shifting, with each candid revelation dismantling walls that had stood too long. She hoped fervently that Mark would rise to meet their expectations, not just for them, but for himself. But then, an unexpected voice called out from the back, a familiar sound that struck Emily like lightning. "What about my story?" It was the abandoned maid, and everyone turned to see her stepping forward, her demeanor confident despite the emotional chaos around her. "Your stories are painful, but I lived through something unimaginable. For 25 years, I watched the privileged disregard those just below them. I served without a name, without respect." She paused, her eyes fierce, as if igniting that spark of courage she had kept buried for so long. "But I recovered. I learned to reclaim my worth, and I'm here to share how it's been done." Emily felt her heart race, anticipation swelling in her chest. This woman had the strength to turn her experience into something transformative. She could offer a revelation Mark might never have expected. As the woman stepped further into the light, Emily exchanged a glance with Mark. His face was a mask of shock, yet there was something else: curiosity, a flicker of hope mingling with trepidation. What could this woman unlock? What truths lay ahead? "Tell us your story," Emily urged gently, the energy in the room crackling with a new tension. But as the maid began to speak, Emily braced for revelations that could change everything. Would this be the turning point they all fervently hoped for? Or would the past cast a shadow too long to escape? As the maid stood before them, her voice firm yet full of the weight of unshared experiences, the courtroom held its breath. For too long, I believed I was invisible, she began, her words wrapping around the audience like a blanket of shared pain. I was just a face in the background, a ghost amid the glitter of the wealthy. But I survived and now I thrive. Emily leaned forward, feeling the energy swell around the room. Each word from the maid was like a key, unlocking pent-up emotions and desperation. The room's charged silence felt alive with anticipation. Every ear was tuned in, every heart was vulnerable, even Mark's. I started as an immigrant, washing dishes and cleaning floors. I was grateful to have a job, but each day, I wiped away the remnants of others' lives, burying my own dreams. I spent years feeling less than human. There were moments I wondered if anyone even saw me or my struggles. She paused, her eyes scanning the faces in the crowd, the pain palpable in her gaze. Mark began to squirm, the reality of her words piercing through his armor. Emily could see him battling an internal conflict, wrestling with guilt and newfound understanding. But through every scrape and bruise, I learned an invaluable lesson. The maid continued, passion igniting her words. I learned that I am not an afterthought. My story matters, and it is one of resilience. The atmosphere shifted, it vibrated with courage, and hope gripped Mark's heart. It felt transformative, like a call to action that echoed in his veins. I left that life, she declared, and I fought to build something new. I want everyone here to know it's possible to rise from the ruins of despair and claim your place in this world. Just because someone defines you doesn't mean you have to accept it. A ripple of applause erupted, catching the maid by surprise. She straightened, a flicker of pride igniting her spine, and then continued, her tone more urgent. This isn't just my fight, it's for all of us. We can't let anyone stay voiceless. Change begins here, in this room. Mark's expression changed, his face finally betraying its former stoicism. I want to change, he managed to say, his voice barely more than a whisper yet resolute. I need to change. Emily could see the crowd leaning in, hope blooming like wildflowers in the desert. A few people exchanged glances, smiles creeping onto weary faces. This was the spark they needed, a whisper of possibility drifting through the heavy air. Then let me help you, let me guide you on this journey, the maid said, her gaze fixed on Mark, her voice like an anchor to the tides of change swirling around them. If you're willing to listen and learn, we can reshape the narrative. Mark nodded slowly, tears pooling in his eyes. The realization that he could finally step into a role that uplifted instead of oppressed was almost too much to bear. As emotion swelled and the crowd erupted into applause once more, Emily felt an overwhelming surge of hope. A path was clearing not just for Mark, but for this community and everyone they had lost in the system. The potential for redemption sparkled like the dawn breaking through the dark. But just as the applause settled, a voice broke the air once more, sharp and jarring. What about the ones who exploited us? It was a harsh reminder, a needed touch of reality. Everyone turned to see a young woman at the back, her brow furrowed in defiance. When are they going to face accountability? The eyes in the courtroom shifted, the fragile optimism hanging in the air suddenly thickened with a new tension that threatened to undo what had been built. Would they confront the real source of their pain? Or was this just another chapter in their ongoing battle? And as Mark faced the crowd, a new resolve forming in his chest, Emily wondered if this could finally be the moment they demanded justice, not just for themselves but for the ones who had been silenced for too long. The air in the courtroom shifted, charged with a tension that felt both fragile and explosive. Emily could sense the unease ripple through the crowd, a collective realization dawning. The young woman's question hung overhead, nearly palpable, as people's gazes darted around the room, uncertain of how to respond. Mark, still on the precipice of change, opened his mouth to speak, but the words caught in his throat. He turned to the young woman, his heart pounding more fiercely than ever. You're right. We can't just talk about our own struggles if we don't address those who have caused them. No real change can happen without accountability. His voice was stronger now, infused with raw honesty. Emily felt pride wash over her for him, but also trepidation. Would they be ready to confront the heart of their issues, or would they shy away from the storm that awaited on the other side of truth? The maid stepped forward again, her expression a blend of encouragement and caution. Exactly. We must demand that those who exploit the vulnerable be held accountable. But change requires unity. We can't let fear silence us. Together, we can rewrite our futures. The crowd stirred, murmurs mixing with applause. Many seemed eager for more, others, however, recoiled at the prospect of confrontation. No one wanted to revisit the painful memories of betrayal, the faces of those who had profited from their struggles. Emily could see it in their eyes, the tightness in their jaws, like they were bracing themselves for a coming storm. Look, the maid said, her voice steadier, acknowledging the wrongdoings of those in power isn't easy. It brings up anger, grief, and confusion. But we have the right to our voices, every one of us. Each word seemed to crack open the lid on their pain, allowing it to breathe. Suddenly, an elderly man in the front row, with weathered hands and deep lines marking his face, stood up. I lost everything to them, he said, his voice trembling but unwavering. My family, my home, everything was stripped away. What can we do now? How do we make them listen? Emily felt the weight of his loss as if it were a shadow hanging over them all. This man embodied every person they sought to protect, every story tucked away and left behind. We can organize, Mark shouted, his voice rising above the din. We can come together, demand meetings, letters, and ultimately action. We can't allow them to hide any more. Mark's words were interrupted by the sound of a low murmur rippling through the crowd. Emily could see the awareness dawning, an ember of unity beginning to flicker to life. Hope surged inside her, a feeling almost foreign but exhilarating. Perhaps this was the spark they needed, the moment they would coalesce into something powerful. But not everyone was convinced. A well-dressed woman in the back scoffed, crossing her arms tightly. And what, pray tell, do you think would come of that? You think they care? They'll just brush us off. The skepticism felt like a punch to the gut, but Emily knew it was a necessary challenge. We can't let fear define us, she called out, her voice firm. What if we demand change collectively? They have to listen, we have to make them. But how? The woman shot back, frustration seeping through her tone. Mark stepped forward, determination radiating from him. By standing together and refusing to back down. We're worth it. Our voices carry power. But it starts now, here, in this moment. As the room buzzed with a mix of fear and budding hope, Emily took a deep breath. She could feel the crowd's emotions shift, wavering between doubt and conviction, but she could tell they were on the brink of something monumental. Just then, a figure in the corner of the room caught Emily's eye. A familiar face pulled from the shadows, someone she thought was long gone. Her heart raced, the significance of this appearance electrifying the air around them. Who were they, and what truths could they bring that might tip the scales of justice in their favor? The questions hung in the air, heavier than ever, as the room braced for the unexpected revelation. Would this be the missing piece that could unite them all? Emily's pulse quickened. The figure emerging from the shadows made her heart skip a beat. As they stepped into the light, recognition crashed over her like a wave. It was Rachel, her childhood friend, her companion in all of Emily's youthful dreams and struggles. The years had changed her, yet the fire in her eyes remained untouched, burning brightly with untold stories. Rachel moved slowly through the crowd, her presence commanding attention. The murmurs faded to stillness. Everyone was aware that something important was about to unfold. Emily could hardly breathe. Memories of their shared laughter and tears flooded back, tangled with thoughts of what had pulled them apart. Mark's eyes flicked to Rachel, a silent question on his face. Was this the ally they were waiting for? The missing piece of the puzzle? Rachel reached the center and paused. The crowd was fixated on her, their eyes wide with anticipation. I've watched from afar, she began, her voice steady, yet laced with emotion. I once thought my dreams could only exist in the shadows of my past. But when I heard about this gathering, when I learned about all of you, I knew I had to come back." Her words struck a chord, reviving hope in the hearts of those who felt buried beneath reminders of failure. 25 years ago, I faced my own demons. I was left with nothing but broken promises and shattered dreams. She paused, allowing the weight of her story to sink in. But I learned transformation starts with us. We can't wait for others to give us our power. We have to take it. Emily felt a rush of exhilaration. Rachel's journey of survival and resilience echoed the struggles shared in the room. The truth that every scar carried a story rang clear. "But how?" a voice asked, tinged with desperation, echoing the earlier question. "How do we really begin?" Rachel stepped closer, vulnerability etched across her features. "By embracing our pain, and using it as fuel. Each of you has a story of loss. But those stories can become our strength. When we share, when we unite, we can shake the ground beneath those who exploit us." Tears glistened in the eyes of the elderly man from before. The anger and grief he carried were framed in the light of new purpose. Soon, others began to speak, their stories spilling into the open, each voice a thread in the tapestry they were weaving together. It was terrifying yet freeing. Mark turned to the crowd, urgency in his tone. "We have a choice to make. We can let our stories bind us or tear us apart. Who are we? What do we stand for?" The atmosphere thickened, vibrating with collective energy. Emily felt hope swell in her chest, drowning out the fear that had been lurking in the corners of her mind. Together, they were a chorus of voices on the verge of harmony, ready to challenge the dissonance that had plagued them. Suddenly, Rachel glanced over her shoulder. "Look, I didn't come empty-handed. Who I used to be made me realize that what I built in those years is something we can all aspire to, the right connections, the resources." She hesitated, her voice trembling. "I want to help." Gasps of surprise rippled through the crowd, a flicker of disbelief igniting like dry grass catching fire. The mix of hope and skepticism formed a whirlwind of emotions, embodying the clash of their shared pasts and uncertain futures. Could they really trust her after all this time? Mark let the energy linger before he spoke again, his gaze laser-focused. "This isn't just about us. This is about recognizing that every voice matters. Together, we can become a force." But deep within Emily, a familiar fear began to surface. Would Rachel genuinely guide them towards liberation, or would this unveil an even deeper betrayal? As the crowd moved closer, the pulse of collective potential echoed in their hearts. But a creeping shadow loomed on the horizon. Even as their hope ignited, so too did the weight of the past, thickening the air with unspoken fears. Would they rise above their histories or become ensnared once again? And with that, a question flared like a beacon in Emily's mind. What if Rachel wasn't the savior they desperately hoped for, but instead the catalyst to unravel everything they had just begun to reclaim? The courtroom was electrified, a tapestry of emotions woven from loss, pain, and newfound courage. Rachel stood tall, the light of her presence igniting a spirit of resilience among them all. Emily could feel the tension vibrating like a taut string ready to snap. Would this moment of potential transform their stories, or unravel the fragile unity they had just begun to forge? Together, Rachel urged again, looking deeply into the eyes of the gathered crowd. "Let us reclaim our stories, and let us make them heard. I have resources and connections I can share to elevate our voices. But I need you to commit to this fight, to hold each other accountable." With every word, Emily saw hope flicker like candle flames catching on dry paper. "Accountability," Mark echoed, stepping forward, his voice gaining strength. "It isn't just my burden to bear. It belongs to all of us. If we want change, we need to tackle this together." There was something resolute in his tone, the calm before a much-needed storm. The audience was buzzing now, conversation sparking like kindling. Emily could feel the transformation occurring, a wave of collective energy pouring into the space. Amidst the excitement, she sensed the simmering uncertainty lurking just beneath the surface, a reminder of the darkness they had all faced. Rachel approached Mark, eyes reflecting both awe and skepticism. What are you prepared to change, really? Her question hung in the air, weighty and fierce. Words are easy, but will you act? Will you trust us? Yes, Mark said, a newfound clarity shining through his eyes. I'm done hiding behind my privilege. I'm ready to listen, to learn from you. It's time to build something different. Fires ignited as more voices rose, sharing snippets of their dreams: a community garden, educational scholarships for their children, a safer neighborhood built on mutual respect. Emily felt her tears spill forth, the sheer catharsis of transformation pouring out, as one by one, their aspirations filled the air, buoying them up like boats on a rising tide. Watching the reactions in the audience, she didn't just see hope, she saw the awakening of souls long muted. This is it! She exclaimed, her heart swelling with pride. This is how we begin to change. Together, pooling our talents and resources. This isn't just about honesty, it's about empowerment. More people stepped forward, eager to share their stories. They were finally breaking free from their silences, traditions of shame replaced by the freedom of truth. I've spent years feeling like I didn't belong, said the elderly man from earlier. But when I hear your words, it feels like I'm finally part of something. Together, we can create a legacy. His voice cracked, but it was filled with fire and conviction. As murmurs of encouragement swelled, something snapped within Mark. He stood up straighter, his silhouette cutting against the courtroom light. I will stand by you. I will fund a community initiative, he declared, the words tumbling out as if they had been trapped inside for too long. We can create employment opportunities, offer education to our youth. It's time to right the wrongs. Cheers erupted, lifting them all into a shared frenzy of excitement. But Emily felt a rumble of doubt. What about accountability for the pain inflicted? She asked, her voice leaning on the edge of caution. You can't just take action and brush over the past. We need to ensure this isn't just another round of empty promises. Mark's mouth opened to respond, caught between enthusiasm and reason. I want to make this right, he insisted, his tone growing firmer. I genuinely do. But as she looked into his eyes, Emily could feel the swirling complexity of his motives. Would the weight of their pasts overshadow his newfound commitment? Could they balance accountability with hope? The faces in the crowd twinkled with uncertainty. We need to ensure our stories are not forgotten, Rachel urged, her voice unwavering. By doing this, we empower ourselves and our community. It begins with transparency. Mark, can you promise that future decisions will involve us? Yes, he responded with a fervor that brought a fresh wave of excitement. I want this to be a partnership, one where you hold me accountable. Amid the rising anticipation, a powerful sense of awakening began to settle across the courtroom. One by one, people were standing tall, their stories interlacing like a powerful force of nature, a movement. Tears cascaded and laughter erupted, and it felt as if the air thickened with possibility. In that moment, Emily felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The fear that once gripped her was shed, replaced by something electric. This wasn't just her victory, it was their rebirth. They'd taken their pain and transformed it into purpose, found strength in their shared journeys, and built a bridge toward the future. As order emerged from the ebb and flow of voices, Emily stood alongside Mark and Rachel, ready to take the climactic step. This would be the moment they would face the past together, navigating it forward in unison. Join us. This is where healing begins. Together, we will not stop until justice is realized. Emily shouted, and the room erupted in agreement once more, the voices resonating with a collective roar. They stepped forth into the light, facing the future hand in hand, a community reborn, filled with promise. This was the transformation of their lives, and now, it also shaped the destiny of many who once thought they were invisible. It was the culmination of years of despair, and yet, through the darkness, they had forged a new path, a brighter tomorrow. And in that moment, watching their lives intertwine, Emily knew her mission was only just beginning. Transformation had taken root, and together they would rise. Now, if you want to keep moving forward, if you're ready to join this journey and witness our next incredible stories, you need to subscribe right now. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and show support for these tales of hope. Let us know in the comments how the ending made you feel. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation. Don't wait not even one more second. Your support matters, and every action helps build this amazing community.